This is a very basic introduction to Adobe Illustrator. You're going to want to have the handout that your teacher should give you, and it says working with objects at the top, and it's got a post-it note photocopied onto it for some reason. But we're just going to go through setting up a document, drawing those basic shapes and the different methods of drawing them. Now when you get in here, you'll want to make sure that your document's probably A4. Mine defaults to letter for some reason. Units, millimeters, and you don't actually need a bleed here. It does the same thing that it does in Illustrator though. I'm going to put mine on 3, and I'm just going to leave all this other stuff as it is and click OK. Now when that comes up with a new page layout, it's going to be very similar, some of these tools, to what they are in InDesign. So for example, I've got the selection tool and the direct selection tool, and they do the same thing that they do in InDesign. So let's say I draw a rectangle. I can get the direct selection tool and move that rectangle around, or I can get the selection tool and move that rectangle around, or I can get the direct selection tool and get those points and change the outside of the frame or the shape that I'm working with. So looking at that working with objects thing, the first thing we've got is the rectangle tool, and that's this one here. You can click and drag to make a rectangle, or alternately you can click and put in an exact size, 80 by 90 millimeters, and I get that in there. While dragging, you can hold shift and it will constrain the proportions so that you get a perfect square in this case. And I'm still amazed at how many of you manage to stretch images even in InDesign, which it's quite difficult to actually stretch and put an image out of proportion. So you need to be aware of that you should hold shift when you're resizing things. Doesn't matter what it is. You can always crop parts off, but you don't want to resize things and make it all weird and skewy. So you can hold shift to draw it in proportion, and you can hold alt to draw it from the center out. So notice that little X up there is where I started clicking, and now it's kind of, that's become the center of my area. So if I click here, normally it's the top left, but if you hold alt, it becomes the center. This is especially useful for circles. Second tool is the rounded rectangle tool, and it's pretty much the same as the square. Hold shift to make a perfect square, hold alt to draw from the center out. But it comes with a few other tools. You can push up and down on the arrow keys to make it more rounded, and you can see those corners there getting more rounded, and as I push down they get less rounded. If it's square like that, you'll want to push up to make it more rounded. So that's the rounded rectangle tool. Underneath that we've got the ellipse tool. Draws circles. Hold shift, makes a perfect circle. Hold the alt, you can draw the circle from the inside out. Hold alt and shift and you draw a perfect circle from the inside out. Same with squares and rectangles. That's all there is to it with that one. And once again, you can click to give it a width and a height. If you click that lock button, it's going to be a perfect circle. So 50 millimeters, click OK, done. Next one is the polygon tool, which is this one here. And up and down will change the number of sides. 3-sided polygon is a triangle. You can keep going up and up and up until it looks more like a circle, but there's not really any need for that. Shift will make it aligned along that bottom face. Okay, so the bottom surface there will be flat when you hold shift. Alt draws it from the inside, center out. No, you can't draw from the center out with the polygon. I'm not sure why that is. So that's the polygon. Up and down change the number of sides. Star is pretty much the same, but it's the more complex tool. Okay, so star, alt doesn't draw from the center out. Shift will make it kind of straight pointing up. Up adds more points to your star. Down removes points from it. And then if you push control, you can make it more pointy. And you can also kind of turn it in the other way. So up and down add more points to it. Control makes it pointier. Shift makes it point straight up. So those are the basic tools. And then we've got things like basic editing. You can click this to move it around. You may find sometimes that you go to click this and it doesn't move. If it doesn't have a fill on it, then you won't be able to move. And I'll get to fills and strokes in a moment. But if you try to move it and it doesn't, you might have to click the outline to move it instead. Deleting objects is just the delete key or the backspace key, or right click and no, it's not there. Select maybe. Nope, you can't do it that way. So delete or backspace will delete it. Scaling is this bit up here. And this is where you'll want to hold shift no matter when you're scaling an object. This is very rarely you'll want to make it look like that. Okay, it just looks odd, it's out of proportion. So you want to make sure that you're keeping everything in proportion by holding shift when you scale. And of course, you can't do it when you scale it with one of these. Oh, you can, actually. You can scale it down and scale it that way and hold shift, and it will keep it in proportion, which is really important. Rotating objects is just you move your cursor to the outside and rotate around. If you hold shift, it'll do it in increments of 45 degrees. And then we've got copying and pasting objects. Control C, Control V will make a copy. Whenever you paste something in Illustrator, it goes right into the center of the page, like that. However, say I want to copy this one and make a copy exactly where it is. And there will be reasons that you want to do that. You can go Edit, Paste in Place. It puts another copy exactly there, and I'll show you, because if I scale it down and then hold Alt, so I scale down from the center out, you can see I've got two copies there. I'll just delete these other ones. Then if I copy again, Edit, Paste in Place, which is Control Shift V, I can then scale this one down. Okay, so I've got that shape there. You can also drag a copy out. Hold the Alt key and then drag a copy. You make a copy, whatever you're clicking on. Control Z obviously undoes. Now stacking objects, this is really important. And I'm just going to put some color on these things here. This is the fill color and this is the stroke color. So you'll notice this shape has a white fill and a black stroke. Now I'm just going to pick a green fill for it. And the reason it uses the fill instead of the stroke is because that's what's in front over here. You can also do it up the top here. So fill and stroke. This is none, no stroke. And in Illustrator, you're going to work with that a lot. You don't want black outlines on everything sometimes. I'll make that blue, and we'll go to this one. I'll make it none, and I'll make it green. All right, so there's my shape. But say I don't want this one in the front. I'm going to make a copy of it actually over here. But I want it to go to the back. I can right-click, Arrange, Send to Back, and that puts it at the back. But say I just want it behind this blue one here. I can right-click, Arrange, Send Backwards, then right-click, Arrange, Send Backwards, and do that way. However, the problem is if I've got lots of things that I want to arrange, that's going to take ages to do. So there are some shortcuts. And you'll have to take a look at the document to see these. It is Arrange, and it's the little square brackets. So Control plus the right square bracket brings it forward. Control plus the left square bracket, I'm talking about the left and right ones on the keyboard, not which way they're pointing, will send it backwards. And so I can do this. You can see that it's going forwards in the layer order and coming backwards as I'm tapping those keys. That's a really handy one to remember the shortcut for, because otherwise you'll waste ages trying to figure out or continually right-clicking on there, especially when you've got 20 or 30 things on the page and you want to reorder them. So it's easier just to hit those shortcut keys. Okay, the grouping objects is also really important. Say you've made a really cool image, you might want to use it again. So here's my star. I'm going to group it. That means that when I click on it, everything gets selected, and I can move it around just by clicking on any point on there. I can also copy it entirely. And say I want to edit that group. I need to double click on it. At the top here, I get a little bar showing what layer I'm in. We're mainly going to work in layer 1. So we're not going to use any other layers because everything can be done within one layer and you just group everything together. Layers in Illustrator are really only useful for all these different kinds of complex blending modes, masking, which we won't be doing. So I'm now in this group and I can edit them individually, like that. You want to make sure that if you're in group mode and you want to start drawing something else, then you get out of group mode by clicking back one level and just go back to this normal mode. Or just double click somewhere else in the empty area or hit escape. Okay, each of those will get you out of group mode. Ungrouping objects is pretty much the same as grouping it. You just right click and ungroup, and that's it. What you want to do is that task there, 2.1, drawing with basic shapes, and using those tools like the polygon tool to create some shapes like this. You can find the center in this case, hold Alt and draw exactly out from the center. And I'm putting color on mine, but you don't have to. And then draw an ellipse. I'll draw an ellipse down here. You can use these inference points as well to tell where you are. And then I'll put the color on that, which will be yellow fill. And then lastly, I'm going to use a rounded rectangle. Draw out from the center, like that. So there's my exclamation mark. I'm going to move that down. If you hold shift while you move something, it'll keep it in line, but I'm moving it like that. Then I'll group those objects, group, and done. Okay, so there's a very simple little vector icon that I've made. Now I'm going to go on from that and just continue on with this video here into strokes and fills, which I have talked about a little bit already. So say if I create a rounded rectangle over here. At the top here and over on the left, I have got all these different fill colors. And you're not limited to those. It's not like InDesign where you have to mix a color. You can double click on this and it will bring up the color picker, but there's also a range of colors up here. Now say you want to work with a particular color theme. Here's what's really cool about Illustrator. It's got this swatch libraries down here. And you can click on any of this and go, okay, kid stuff, cool. Here's a whole lot of color schemes associated with kid stuff. Okay, so bright rainbow colors there, soft pastels at the top. Say I want to go to earth tone. Okay, there's all these earth tone color schemes that I can work with. And you can stick with those because they're quite cool. We've got skin tones. Okay, so if I was doing some vector animation with people, I could use those skin tones in there. There's lots of different ones in here, so I won't worry too much about them. Default swatches, basic RGB is what we have got open, I think. It is, yes, it is. Okay, so that's what we've got open by default. You can apply gradients to it, patterns as well, and then we've got other colors in here too. And these should all be up the top here. And any other libraries that you've opened, I think you can add them in here. I'm not sure, probably just dragging. So that will let you fill it. Now stroke on outline, you can pick a color for the outline and then you pick a weight. I'm going to pick a different color because I want to demonstrate something here. Now hopefully you can see the blue line running through the middle there. The outline is kind of centered on that line at the moment. You can pick a different type of outline if you want, and also a particular style of outline. Okay, so there's basic, there's like a grungy brush, and once again, if you click down here, you get heaps of different things that you can play around with. So I could actually use that as an outline. Bit weird, but I could use it if I wanted to. So there's all these different things that I can use as outlines just by clicking this button down the bottom here. In most things, this button here, decorative, decorative banners and seals. So I can use that as a stroke, which looks kind of dumb there, but I could use it. And then we've got style, which I'm not sure if it's going to load for me. Looks like it's crashed maybe. I know it's loaded the styles up. This will give us style to the whole thing. So this one here makes it look like a button, and that one gives it a really smooth fill edge. Oops. Like that. I can turn the style off, which is that one there, just back to normal. Okay, so I've got no settings there. The things which I'm looking for, but they're not available at the top here. So I'm just going to set this up and go green and pink and turn that stroke all the way up. Now if you click the stroke button here, you'll get more stroke options. This is what I was looking for. I'm going to turn this right up so you can see that blue line running through the middle. Stroke. And you can choose where you want the stroke to be. On the line, inside the line, or outside the line. You might think, well, what's the point of this? There is a point to this because you can add multiple strokes to a line. You could have a stroke on the outside of the line, then you could have another stroke on the inside of a line, and then a smaller stroke on the set going on the line, and kind of get some really cool effects happening with that. So you will want to make a decision. I mean, if you're only having one stroke, it's up to you. On the line is probably fine. You've got these other stroke options down here. Lastly is gradients. And gradients are a bit of a weird one, because what you have to do is actually apply a gradient to the shape that you're working with. And it can be a little bit odd. So what you want to do is open the gradient panel on the right, select your object and change the gradient to linear. Now from there, you can then decide, okay, I actually want to have some different gradients. So what you can do is over here, you can click on the color on the left and pick the first color you want it to be. And then the color on the right, you can pick that. So I've got a gradient from green to blue here. I can redraw this gradient. As long as I've got the gradient tool selected, I can redraw this in any way I want. So for example, say I get a circle and hold that. I'll get rid of that outline on it. I'm going to change this to a radial gradient and then redraw it. Oops, that's not gradient tool. And then redraw it from there to there. If I change this, so maybe it's a lighter blue color like that, and I'll make this a darker blue. Okay, I can get some 3D looking effects by using a gradient. So that looks like a kind of a 3D sphere there. There are loads of gradients up here as well. If I just click gradients, there's heaps. Okay, so if I click seasons, I get all these different types of gradients which I can apply to my shape. Okay, there's some that are better than others. And any of them can be converted from linear to radial quite easily, just by using that there. You'll notice down the bottom, this has more than 2 colors on it. You can just click plus, plus, add more colors, slide them around and change the way that the gradient looks. Click and drag them off to change those colors. And you can see on the left there how that shape is changing to match the gradient. You can rearrange them. There's loads of things that you can do with gradients. So what your task is after you do that is you can also change them on here as well, by the way. So this little tool here, if you mouse over it, you'll get them appearing there. What your task is to create that clock. Now I'm going to make the clock and then go over it in the next video, just because it's going to take me a little while to make and I don't want to sit here and have you watch me make it. That'll be a bit dull. Take time to make the clock, especially the clock face, and add some gradients to it. Now there is one cool effect that you can do. Actually, I'm not going to make the clock, I'm just going to show you this. Ellipse Tool, and I'm going to make this a linear gradient from there to there, and I might just make it a bit lighter at one end, darker at this end, so dark green. We can see that, and I'm going to bring that gradient from top to bottom. Now I'm going to copy that circle, Control C, Control-Shift-V to paste it in place. Scale it down using Alt so it's in the center. Okay, I've got that circle there. I'm going to use the gradient tool and draw it from the top to the bottom now. And what you will see is that that looks like a kind of a convex button, or like a button that comes up at the sides here, and then it looks like it kind of goes in. And that's just using gradients. So with your clock face, that's what you want to try and do, and then put the clock face in the center here so it looks a bit more 3D than just a flat button or a gradient running behind it without any purpose. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with gradients. You just need to take the time to actually attempt them. So that's been a very basic introduction to Illustrator. Go through, make that clock, make those other tools, and if you can get these, the next thing is quite a jump in skill. It's that pen tool that we started working with in InDesign. But we're going to go over some pretty basic things on how to use that, tips and tricks on using that pen tool, because it's probably one of the most powerful tools in Illustrator if you could master it.